On a Friday morning in March, a dive team pulled my wife's car out of the river with a cable and a crane, and the whole boat ramp went quiet, and the car came up with the windows down and nobody inside. 10 months later, I sat in a conference room and watched my wife sign divorce papers, alive, tan, and living 2 states away with the man she had been seeing behind my back for over a year. The judge gave her half of the house and nothing on top of it. No alimony. I live in Virginia. I own a paving company, driveways and parking lots, 10 men on the crews in the busy season. My wife worked as an insurance adjuster. She handled property claims, hail, floods, house fires, and when a big storm hit anywhere in 3 states, her company would send her out for a week or 2 at a time to work the damage. We were married 13 years, 2 kids. Our daughter is 12. Our son is 8. She left on a Friday afternoon at the end of February. A hailstorm had torn up half of Tennessee the week before, and she told me her company was deploying adjusters for 10 days, and she kissed the kids, and she took the highway west with her bags in the back seat. None of that was unusual. She had done deployments for years, and I kept the kids' schedule on the wall by the back door and the crew schedule in my telephone, and we ran the house like that every storm season. Saturday morning, she texted me a picture of her hotel coffee. Saturday night, nothing. Sunday, nothing. I called and it went straight to voicemail, and I told myself the towers were down in the storm zone because that had happened on deployments before. Monday morning, I called her company office to ask which hotel they had put her in. The woman on the phone put me on hold, and when she came back, her voice had changed. There was no deployment for her. Her name was not on any storm roster, and she had put in for 2 weeks of vacation time a month earlier. I stood in my office with the phone against my ear, looking at a wall calendar with her handwriting on it, and I could not make one word come out. The woman asked if I was still there. I hung up and called the sheriff's office. There is no waiting period to report a missing adult where I live. They tell you to call right away, so I called right away. That night, 2 deputies sat in my living room asking me questions, and my daughter listened from the stairs when she was supposed to be in bed. The first days were phone work. The deputies pulled her phone logs and her bank cards, and a detective came to the house and took her laptop and her hairbrush, and he asked me for the password to our accounts, and I gave him everything because I had nothing to hide. Her mother drove in from 2 hours west and slept in our daughter's room. I told the kids their mom's trip had a problem and that the police were helping us find her, and my son accepted that, and my daughter did not, and she asked me straight out if her mom was dead. On the 4th day, a man fishing for catfish below a bridge called the sheriff's office because his fish finder was showing a shape on the bottom near the boat ramp, a shape with corners. The sonar boat went out that same afternoon and confirmed it. A vehicle, upright, in about 15 feet of water, just past the end of the county boat ramp. A diver went down with a light, came up with the plate number, and it came back to my wife's car. The sheriff called me himself, and he told me to bring somebody with me to the ramp, and that told me what they expected to pull out of that river. My brother drove me. There were 2 fire trucks, an ambulance, the dive trailer, and a wrecker with a long cable, and there was a news van parked up on the road, and I stood on that ramp in my work boots and watched a diver go under with a hook. It took them most of an hour to rig it. When the winch started pulling, everybody on that ramp stopped talking. The firemen, the deputies, the news people. The back bumper broke the surface first, and then the roof, and the water poured off the glass, and the windows were down, and the car was empty. No wife, no body. Her purse sat on the passenger floor, soaked, with her driver's license still in it, and her phone was in the cup holder, dead, and her wallet with her bank cards was gone. The divers went back down for the rest of that day, and never brought up anything else. I stood on the ramp the whole time they searched. The ambulance crew kept looking over at me. The sheriff walked up and said they would drag the river downstream and bring dogs to the banks. And then he asked me, in front of my brother, where I had been on Friday night. I answered him. I understood why he asked it, and it still hit me hard. For the next 9 days, that river got searched harder than any stretch of water in this county has ever been searched. Sonar boats ran grids from the ramp down to the dam. Divers worked the deep holes. Dogs walked both banks. Volunteers and waders poked through the brush piles, and a helicopter flew the water line at first light. And they found a lawn chair, a cooler, and half a John boat that had been down there since before my kids were born. They did not find my wife because my wife was not in that river. I did not know that yet. I believed she was dead. I want to be straight about what those days were because I have never been lower in my life. I picked out words for a funeral in my head while I watched boats drag for her. My son slept in my bed. My daughter stopped eating regular meals, and her grandmother had to sit with her at breakfast. And while all of that was happening in my house, strangers online decided I had killed her. It started with a social media group called Finding Her, set up by a woman my wife went to high school with. It had 400 members by the first weekend. By the second weekend, it had 30,000, and the posts were not about finding her anymore. They were about me. Somebody posted our address. Somebody filmed my paving crew at a job and asked in the caption why I was working while my wife was missing. And that video got 2 million views, and the comments told me to enjoy prison. A man in a truck sat outside my house for 3 nights filming my front door, and the sheriff had to send a deputy to move him along. The detective asked me to come in for a second interview, and then a third, and at the third one, he slid a piece of paper in front of me and asked if I would sit for a polygraph. My lawyer, who I had hired by then because my brother made me, told me to decline it because polygraphs measure stress, and I had not slept in 2 weeks, and an anxious, innocent man fails those things every day of the week. So I declined, and the group found out I declined because everything leaked out of that county office, and the new post said it, guilty men lawyer up, guilty men refuse the test. My daughter came home from school on a Wednesday and asked me why a boy in her class said her dad was going to jail. I told her the truth. I said, some people online are saying I hurt your mom, and it is not true, and the police are doing their job by checking me first because that is the job. She looked at me for a second, and then she hugged me and went upstairs. She let our kids believe their mother might be gone, and she let their father take the blame for it. On the 7th night of the search, the town held a vigil at the boat ramp, candles in paper cups, a table with her picture on it, and half the county showed up. Her mother spoke. I stood behind my kids with a hand on each of their shoulders, and 4 different phones filmed my face the entire time, and by morning, a video called "Watch the Husband's Eyes" had 1 million views. The rumors cost me real work. 2 school districts pulled parking lot bids that spring, and a man I have paid for since I started the company called and asked me flat out if he should believe what he was seeing online, and I thanked him for asking instead of deciding, and I kept his business. What I did not know was that the dive team captain had doubts standing on that same ramp on day 4. He wrote in his report that there were no skid marks on the ramp, no yaw marks, no braking scuffs, nothing on the concrete at all, and that the car had gone into the water slow, at an idle, in neutral, with all 4 windows down. Her phone had been powered off in town hours before the car ever touched the water, and the detective told me later that was its own tell. Cars that crash into rivers do not look like that. The detective sat on that report and kept working, and I found out later that is standard. They keep it quiet while the spouse is still on the list. The money moved me off the list. The detective pulled 14 months of register data from the stores because bank statements only showed totals, and there it was. Cash back, $40 here, $60 there, 2 and 3 times a week, at the grocery store, at the pharmacy counter, everywhere we already spent money, every one of them small enough that I never looked twice because I was up nights writing paving bids. It added up to a little over $9,000 pulled out of our family money and bills, and none of it was anywhere in that house. He showed me the spreadsheet at the 4th interview, and he watched my face while I went down the column, and whatever he saw there is what finally convinced him. He said, "Your wife planned this for over a year." He said, "We are treating this as a voluntary disappearance, and I am sorry, because in my experience, this is going to get worse for you before it gets better." The detective walked me out, and I called my brother from the parking lot and said it for the first time. She might be alive, which was the best news in the world, and she might have planned the whole thing. 19 days after the car came out of the river, her bank card got used for the first time. One swipe at a gas station 600 miles away for a few dollars, and the camera over the register caught a woman in a ball cap and sunglasses paying cash for food and using the card for the difference. The detective drove to my house and put the photo on my dining room table. Her mother's chin, her hand on the counter, her thumb ring. I did not need the face. All those years, and I knew her standing slouch through a gas station camera. It was her. 2 days after that photo, deputies in the state where she used that card made contact with her in person. They confirmed the person is there of their own free will, and then they close the case, and they do not tell the family where, because a grown woman has the legal right to walk away from her life. The sheriff drove out to deliver it in person. He stood in my living room and he said, "She is alive, she is safe, and the case is closed on our end." My son heard it from the stairs and cheered because all he heard was that his mom is alive. My daughter looked at the sheriff and then at me and left the room. Her grandmother sat down on my couch and did not say anything for the rest of the night, and that woman had organized prayer vigils for her. I asked the sheriff about charges. He said she never called us, she never filed a report, she never claimed a dime from anybody. She never said one false word to one official person. The staging was aimed at us, not at the law. The one thing on the books was the car itself, dumping a vehicle in state waters, and the county attorney looked at it and passed, because a misdemeanor against a woman she would have to be dragged back for was not worth the paperwork. No charges, and no bill for the search either, because there was nobody to send it to. Somebody in that group posted the update that night, and 30,000 people found out my wife was alive. At the same time, I was still explaining it to my son. Nobody in it apologized to me. The group changed its name and started arguing about her reasons, and I stopped looking at it for good. So, the next morning, I hired a divorce lawyer. She listened to the whole story without writing anything down, and then she told me what the state of Virginia had to say about it, and for the first time in a month, something finally went my way. Adultery in Virginia is a fault ground, and it changes the money. If a spouse is proven to have committed adultery by clear and convincing evidence, the law does not trim spousal support, it bars it completely. There is one narrow exception, and it is called manifest injustice. And my lawyer looked at me and said, "A woman who staged her death, abandoned 2 children, and let their father carry a murder rumor for a month will never see that exception. No judge in this state would hand it to her. But we had to prove the adultery, and to prove it, and to serve her divorce papers at all, we had to find her. So my lawyer hired a private investigator, and that is legal, and that is normal, and it took him 8 days. The investigator found her renting a house with a man on the outskirts of a mid-sized city, a full day's drive from our front door. His report landed on my lawyer's desk, and I knew the man's name. 2 summers before she left, a hailstorm came through our county, and my wife worked local claims for weeks, roofs, siding, gutters, and one of those claims belonged to a man with a lake house and a boat dock and no wedding ring. She handled his claim. She told me about his claim at dinner because the adjuster part was normal life for us, and I never thought about it again. The investigator put the start of it somewhere in that season, a second phone number that showed up in her old phone bills going back to that summer, calls on her drives home, calls on every deployment, and the same number saved in the cloud backup of her contacts under a woman's name from her office. The photographs from the rented house showed the 2 of them in the yard, at a hardware store, holding hands at a farmer's market on a Saturday morning. Back home, her son was sleeping with a nightlight again because he was scared his family was disappearing. My lawyer looked at the file and said, "This is clear and convincing. This is the bar. She is not getting support in any courtroom in this state." The process server knocked on that rented door on a Monday morning. The man answered. The server asked for my wife by her full name, and she came to the door and she signed for the papers, and the server told my lawyer she did not say a single word. Her first word came 4 days later in a text message to my phone, the first contact since the hotel coffee picture. It was a long paragraph. It said she was sorry for the way she did it, but not for doing it, because she had been unhappy for years and did not know how to tell me, and the plan just got away from her, and she never meant for the kids to think she was dead. She thought we would figure out she left on purpose within a day or 2. I did not answer the text. I screenshotted it, sent it to my lawyer, and she entered it into the file, because in that paragraph, my wife admitted the planning, the leaving, and the man, in her words, from her number. My lawyer called it a gift. Virginia lets you file for divorce on adultery grounds without waiting out a separation year, but the case still takes months to move, and ours took 8. She came back to town 3 times in those 10 months. The first time was for her deposition, and I did not see her. My lawyer handled it, and she took the 5th on every question about the man, which is her right, because adultery is still technically a crime here. It did not help her. The photographs, the second phone number, the cash, and her own text message were enough, and the standard does not need her confession. The second time she came back was for mediation, and that was the day I saw my wife again, 7 months after that morning at the boat ramp. She had a new haircut. She looked healthy. She sat down across from my lawyer with her lawyer, and the first position her side took, the very first one, was that she was entitled to spousal support because I was the higher earner, and she had left her job and had no income. I thought my lawyer was going to laugh. She opened the folder instead, and she slid the dive captain's report across first, then the cashback spreadsheet, then the farmer's market photographs, then the text message, and she said, "Your client is statutorily barred from support, and if you want to argue manifest injustice, we will be happy to put the last 6 months in front of a judge, starting with the prayer vigils." Her lawyer asked for a break and walked his client out of the room. Whatever he told her out there worked, because when they sat back down, support was gone from the conversation, and it never came up again. The house was marital property, and in Virginia, fault does not take away her share of what we built while married, and I will not pretend that one did not hurt, but that is how the statute works, and my lawyer had told me up front. She got her half of the equity in the house, paid out through a refinance that I will be working off for years. She did not get $1 of spousal support. The part I still cannot get over all this time later is that she never asked for the kids. Her lawyer proposed supervised visitation, one weekend a month in a neutral location, and my lawyer looked at me, ready to fight, and I said yes, because my kids should not lose their mother twice. The judge signed custody to me without a single objection from her side. Child support got set against her by the state formula, with income imputed to her because she walked away from her job on purpose, and the checks come from a woman with no paycheck, so I can guess who writes them, and I cash them for the kids either way. I never went after the man. Virginia gives a husband no lawsuit against a man in this situation, I asked, and my lawyer shut it down in one sentence, and I have never spoken to him, not once. He knew she was married. He watched that river search on the news like the rest of the country, and he kept her hidden through all of it, and he gets to live with being that man. The only answers I ever got about her reasons came in the one conversation we ever had about it, in the hallway after the final signing. She said she felt invisible in her life, and that the man made her feel seen, and that by the time she wanted out of the plan, the search was so big and the group was so loud that coming back felt impossible, so she just kept driving. She said, I watched the videos of the boat ramp, and I could not make my hands dial the phone. Then she said, tell the kids the truth when they are older. Do not make me a monster. I said, they will get the truth, and if the truth makes you a monster, that is not my doing. And I walked to my car, and that is the last private conversation my wife and I ever had. The first visit was a month after the judgment, at her mother's house. My son had been counting the days out loud at breakfast all week. My daughter got dressed, got in the car, and then could not get out of the car. And my ex-wife, who had not seen her children in almost a year, had to stand on the porch and watch her daughter cry in a driveway. My son hugged her for a solid minute. My daughter finally walked up the steps, stood in front of her mother, and asked her a question. She asked, did you watch us on the news? Her mother did not have an answer, and my daughter walked past her into the house, and I waited down the street at a diner for the 2 hours because supervised visitation means the kids stay, not me. The refinance went through in the winter, and her payout left my account with a wire confirmation number, and that closed the house business between us for good. The visits go on like that now. Her mother supervises, and that is hard on everybody because that woman spent those weeks believing her daughter had drowned, and now she pours sweet tea one Saturday a month and does not talk about it. My son runs to the car when we pull in. My daughter goes, sits through it, and says almost nothing on the drive home. She started seeing the school counselor, and the counselor told me she is angry at her mother and terrified of being like her, and we are working on both, and she is doing better this fall than she was in the spring. The group finally died out. The woman who started it sent me a letter, an actual paper letter, saying she was sorry for what the group became and that she had shut it down, and I wrote back 2 lines thanking her because she looked for my wife back when we all believed she was in that river. The county released the car to me after the case closed, since it was titled in both our names, and it sat on my back lot under a tarp until the divorce was done. One of my crew guys finally asked me if I wanted it gone. The scrapyard gave me $300 for it. I put the money in my son's baseball fund, and I watched him hit 2 doubles in the fall league with the glove that money bought. His mother watched that game too, on a video his grandmother sent her from 2 states away, from the life she sank a car to get. To me, this is ridiculous. Why go through all of that? If you're not happy, just leave. Get out of the relationship. What she did was stupid. She left her kids behind, ruined her car, just to leave the relationship. It doesn't make sense to me. But on the positive side, he lived in Virginia, which is a false state, but she still got a little bit of money, but she didn't get any alimony, and she ended up having to pay child support. See you in the next one.